and welcome. We are delighted to have here with us a veteran of the broadcast sector, Mr. Bharat Ranga. Mr. Bharat Ranga has just started an all-new offering in the Indian entertainment ecosystem, which is Beginnen Media, and his channel is Azad. Azad has had a soft launch already, and from what I understand, it's going to go places. Literally, Bharat, it's going to. This is what a rural entertainment channel.
Right. And we claim that it is India's first rural entertainment video platform. And one of the reasons we say that it is India's first is because most of us marketeers and media owners have not focused on rural India as a category of market separately. We thought rural India needed to be served with whatever we create for urban India. They'll be happy to consume the same stuff.
I'm going to do a flashback. You took your Azadi from Zee in October 2014, and we are now in 2021. So one was wondering where you were all these years. Of course, one knew that you were, pottering around with some interesting projects. So tell us what you've been doing all these years.
Yeah. So one of my early ideas that I wanted to pursue right after Zee were really very large scale and really pretty big. And, once you work with somebody like Mr. Chandra, you cannot think small. You cannot think regular. You cannot think ordinary. And you want to think big. And I didn't realize that I was not under his umbrella anymore. But yet never were able to think small. Which is where one of my MBA juniors, whom I didn't even know, came up to me and told me that actually called me. He said, I've heard that you're turned an entrepreneur and you're making your road shows for your new business plan in the US and in Middle East and all of that. But I have a piece of advice for you. I said, tell me. I don't know you, but tell me. He said, no, I'm from the same alumni as this. I said, okay, go ahead, tell me. So he said, you have some reputation from your corporate experience, and that is why investors will not tell you no, and you will keep running after this rut. The fact is that you have the corporate experience, but you have a zero entrepreneurial experience. So unless you build some bit of your entrepreneurial experience, investors would not seriously back you, but they will not tell you no. That's the bigger worry. And when he told me, I didn't like it actually. But when I reflected on it and I realized that it was worthwhile. But by that time, I had already invested my 1 year and a serious amount of money behind, research of the new project that I was building. But then I realized by early 2016 that it wasn't a good idea to keep pursuing in this, and this boy was right, this guy was right. So I started entering into picking up my learnings as an entrepreneur. So I actually met up with small-time entrepreneurs and picked up small things and learned the ropes hard ways again. And it was a totally different learning than a large Zee corporate learning that I had earlier. And by the time I was going through that journey and I wasn't actually making a huge amount of money or progress or success, one of those early investors whom I'd met in the first phase called me back and asked me, what are you doing now? I said, I'm struggling. And he said, oh no, but I want to hear your struggle story. And I was surprised as to why he would be interested in that. And he said, this is what we wanted you to learn and pick up. And then the same guy backed me here. That's how the story has been.
I agree. And how much time did Azad take? I do remember when, in the more later years at Zee, you were among the prime movers of Zee Anmol. And you did, and Zee was always very grounded, right, in terms of, although you did look at international operations, but your association with Zee obviously would have got you up close with what the real India thinks and the real India wants.
Yeah, so you see, Zee Anmol was one thing that came at the end. We were looking at revamping the whole portfolio of Zee Group in India when I moved from international to domestic back in 2012. The mandate that I had from Chandra was that how do we move up in our network share versus Star? How do we beat them? I still remember we were at about 11% at that time, and Star was at a whopping 19.8% all India network share of viewership. So I came up with a plan of shutting down some 7, 8 channels at that time and launching new channels in order to make sure that we grow in pieces by pieces and come closer to Star or beat them. So out of the 5 channels that I launched, Zee Anmol was one of them. And that was the first proper free-to-air initiative that Zee had done at that time. So Zee had a free-to-air channel called Zee Smile, but we were never paying attention on that. But when I dig down deeper and I realized that the advertisers were more interested in that channel than the media owner ourselves, because they knew that the FTA in the rural area had a good amount of viewership of those old Zee shows, but we weren't aware, we didn't pay attention on that. So I thought, why not, let's package it differently and let's reach out to them and create a nice channel around it. It worked. So based on acquired content, I created 2 channels. One was Zee Anmol and one was Zindagi. So Zindagi was based on acquired content from Pakistan, and Zee Anmol was based on acquired content of Zee library itself. Both were picked up well, while Zindagi didn't grow on overall mass ratings, but Zee Anmol was fabulous, and it was, it taken off pretty well.
Right. And, the fact of the matter is that for a good amount of time, and till today, it is the rural-oriented, the channels that are targeting that sector, which are ruling the roost in terms of viewership numbers.
Yeah, so Zee Anmol is an FTA channel more than the rural channel. So, at that point in time, the learning that we had early in 2012, 13, there were still TAM days when we didn't have the measurement of rural at that time. We still had the measurement of free-to-air within the LC1, which is 1 lakh plus towns and stuff.
Right.
So very little of viewership. That's why only Utsav from Star existed by that time. Small players like Bengal and all were there, and we had a Zee Smile. So not many people were paying attention to that. Rural viewership came into notice only when the BARC came into picture. They started capturing rural audiences separately, which is where Anmol was ahead of its time, and it skyrocketed in terms of viewership when that happened. But still, the approach of Zee Anmol or Star Utsav or some of these channels that you see in free-to-air category is free-to-air. So there's a difference between free-to-air and rural.
It's interesting that you say that, because while people do talk about free-to-air, the general sentiment is that it is going to it is targeting the rural sector. So so what you're saying is that the likes of a Zee Anmol, etc., and I'm not going to there are various others in the category, are not actually targeting the rural sector, but they're just looking at the free-to-air, which may well be in urban India.
Yeah, so you see, free-to-air is an economic parameter that you're not charging a consumer. And there are good amount of viewers in the urban areas that do not want to pay for pay TV. They may be happy consuming content without paying for it. They just want to pay the NCF, the network capacity fee, because they have a TV set, and they want to consume the content for free. So there is this model after Zee Anmol that had got built that, there are more GC channels in free-to-air than in pay, by the way. You wouldn't know that. So there are more Hindi GC channels in free-to-air than in pay. Interestingly, because more people have syndicated the content from pay and followed the model of Anmol. So not only Zee Color Star Sony, but even the others have picked up the content and created the channel. So it's a model now that has got developed. So free-to-air is more about reaching out to people who don't want to pay. So it does not differentiate from the point of view of which geography or which mindset you come from. It comes from the understanding of whether you want to pay for content or you don't want to pay for content.
So how is a rural entertainment channel going to be different from a general entertainment channel in terms of content? For instance, I remember the days when there was a Krishi Darshan, or in a Delhi, or there was Kamgar Vishwa in Mumbai, and they were looking at uh, targeting the agriculturalists, etc. So it's obviously a lot more than just that. It's looking at entertainment. So typically, how is the entertainment going to be different for this segment versus what we have been used to for a period of time?
So at this stage, because our most of our content is under production right now, I can tell you that the difference is extremely simple, very very simple. There's no rocket science behind it, and that's why it was not easy for everybody to pick it up. I incidentally come from a near rural area, so Bikaner is the place where I belong to. Few kilometers away is a place called Khajuraho, which is close to Pakistan border. So I have a sense of what rural India is like from the early days of my life. From there, I moved up to Jaipur and then to Delhi and then to Bombay. And during my international days, I've genuinely traveled the world, I can say that. And I worked across the world. But I see the difference in each of these geographies and each of these mindsets very clearly. So when I was launching Zee Anmol, around the same time, I was launching Ant Pictures. And Ant Pictures was a multiplex urban movie channel for contemporary mindset people for urban areas. And Zee Anmol was for free-to-air areas, which are largely happen to be in the rural and also in the urban. Those two needed totally different mindsets, and I was handling both, and both succeeded. They had different team below. So one thing I had learned over my long experience in media is that you can segment each of the markets and category of audiences separately and create different products. And that's possible if you really genuinely expertise your understanding of that segment of audience. So, like I said, this difference is very simple. It is first rural entertainment platform is because it's the first time somebody's trying to think from the rural point of view. That's all. Now, what is that point of view? How do they think different than you? How do they feel different than you in urban? Is the whole Mahasagar behind it. But at the top, it's a very simple point that it is now meant for them. So currently there's a supply-based market, so they're already consuming most of the urban content that is dished out to them. So what is the need of offering something from their point of view?
I did see a few promos that have been there, in the through the distribution channels, etc., about Azad, and I was a little unsure about the kind of content. So, what is going to be the secret sauce? What is a filter that you will use for choosing content for the channel?
I am not at a liberty to speak about that right now in terms of real secret, but point of view is a huge differentiator. I can give you other examples to explain the point. Let me give you a film example. I don't know if you saw Tanu Weds Manu 1 and 2.
Right, yeah, I did.
Tanu Weds Manu 1 was a single screen film for a heartland film, not rural, heartland. And Tanu Weds Manu 2 was an urban multiplex film. Now, the same characters moved from the smaller place to a London and everything changed. So, the difference between 1 and 2 in the tonality, in the characterization, the story setting, in the language, whom they want to appeal to, explains the point. So the first one wanted to explain to this guy, which is heartland audience, single screen audience. Second one wanted to capture. So suddenly the level of intellect that the comic moments had in Tanu Weds Manu 2 were far more upper than the first one, and which is where more city-bred urban multiplex audiences loved Tanu Weds Manu 2, and more heartland single screen audiences loved Tanu Weds Manu 1.
One of the things we as a differentiator amongst channels if you take the example of a Sony Entertainment Channel, entertainment television, and sub TV, the production quality, the production, the tonality and everything, there's a clear brief given to for sub. Is there a brief that you will be giving to that you've given to your programming people, to your producers, as to this is what we need on the channel and this is what we don't need on the channel? Is there a list of do's and don'ts?
Yeah, so I had launched about 11 channels so far across the world. And for every channel that I had launched, there was a clear-cut brand Bible that we built. So, and I would do an exercise also. For example, the programming team of Ant Pictures and Zee Cinema exactly knew that this film will go to Zee Cinema and this film will go on Ant Pictures. Right. So, so that kind of a clarity, a masala popular Amitabh film would go into a Zee Cinema, and maybe a Yash, your Barjatiya film will go into a Zee Cinema, and new age cinema like a Kai Poche or a Namaste London or Nil Bata Sonata would quickly go into Ant Pictures. So you slowly differentiate through examples and through brand Bibles the difference between the two very clearly. But what I hadn't done in my last 11 channels launches is what I'd done in this one. It actually called something called, we call it PPB. So usually in our business, producers pitch for ideas to channels, right? But we made a producer's pitch, a brand pitch to the producers. It's called BPP. So we wanted to pitch our brand to producers and explain them that this is the kind of portfolio that we want to create. This is the kind of environment we want to create. This is what the kind of brand that we have. We didn't give them the name Azad at that time. Now, of course, everybody knows. But we started our work about a year and a half ago. So we gave them that there's a rural brand, and we gave them the similes of various other brands in the consumer sector to differentiate between others and us. And then we actually explained them that what is the environment of consumer that we want to reach out to, what are some of our initial research about the consumer segment explained, which is a different insight than the insight that you know already. And then what kind of themes and shows that we want. So before that, what kind of themes are currently prevailing in their minds? So what are the issues that are burning in their hearts? And then came down to what kind of concepts that you can come up with. But from here on, you think free and come back. So nobody pitched for a brand in the past. At best they explained what my brand means, and you already know in the past. But we actually pitched it. We actually clarified. And we called their writers for the meetings. And we were very, very clear about it that their writers must understand what our brand stands for, what our consumer stands for, and then come up with the idea.
Interesting. And I like the fact that you're calling yourself a premium Hindi entertainment platform that will feature content for the rural mindset. And I also like the line that you were saying that is unapologetically real Indian. But what you by saying this, you're also saying that the others are not really Indian?
No. So what I'm saying is that either they are apologetic about being real Indian, or if they are unapologetic, then perhaps they are unapologetic Indian but may not be real. Now, what is the difference? I must explain you the difference between Indian and a real Indian that we mean. What we mean by saying this is that the real India lies in the heart of village. Bapu also said that. Gandhi also said that. But today, what is the need to capture that feeling once again? The need is that my understanding is that, whatever I have learned in my early days at Bikaner is from my parents and grandparents, is what actually useful to me the most. Later on, what I learned during my MBA days and then at the Wharton in the US, advanced management program, my kids are in the US today. But all of that, I realized that there's just some advancement and some improvement, but the crux was already made by the time I was 15-year-old. And those values and those preachings and learnings and life experiences are the ones that make me what I am today. The rest of the experience are only sharpening it. So from our heart, our roots, roots of the country are also in the villages. So if you go back to that place and pick up those learnings, is when you realize that that's where the real India lies. And you've reached so far after 70 plus years of independence as a country is largely based on those values and those ideas and those learnings and those virtues, and not based on what you picked up from West. So it's time to bring that to the forefront once again and tell them, look at the power of China. China hasn't learned anything from the West. They only harnessed and developed and sharpened their own base values so strongly that whatever the world said, they went ahead in a certain journey. Same goes for Japan. Same goes for Korea. Why it doesn't go for us? Is because a little more attracted towards what we're picking up cues from West.
It's interesting that you use the Bikaner example, and Bikaner is, of course, known for its interesting bhujiyas. It's also known for its, those intricately carved jarokas, right? So, what is lying behind the jaroka? So what's going to be your driver shows? What's going to be there on day one, week one?
So you see, the timing to talk about that is a bit later, and I would want you to try and get a sense of the idea that whatever is going to come up in terms of product, in terms of the content, we are promising you one thing, that the rural India is going to like it. That's the first part. And they're going to understand that, oh, someone has tried to think my point of view. Someone has tried to see where my heart beats. Someone has tried to relate to me. And someone is trying to tell my story, perhaps. So that I can assure you right now at this stage, that this is a very consumer-specific model where the content is secondary. So if, let's say, if I've invested 100 units of efforts, 75 units of efforts were paid on understanding the consumer because we didn't have that. 25 units were spent in what content to tell, what story to tell. So it's actually, if you get this right, getting this right is easy.
In many ways, rural India is actually many Indias, right? Because the rural India which is there in Rajasthan will perhaps be different in UP, Madhya Pradesh, and the entire Hindi belt. So is there some a specific target geography that you are looking at, or is that how are you going to cater to the to that kind of a crowd?
So you see, there is a bit of Hindi regionalism that I'm trying to bring in. So it's not a national product; it is a regional product. But a regional product, because India, Hindi is still not a national language. Let's accept it. And since we're using Hindi as a language, so it's not a national product. It is a regional product, but regional products relevant for almost everything outside of those 4 states of South, because they all understand Hindi. But we do know that some of the non-Hindi states like West Bengal or Assam, or the 7 states of Northeast and the 7 sisters, as they call it, those, and maybe a bit of Maharashtra, have a strong local language also. So they have a liking for Hindi as well as for that. So Hindi is a shared preference. Whereas there are other about 14 to 17 states in the Hindi-speaking markets, as we call them. They speak also Hindi largely, while despite the fact there's a Gujarati behind, there's a Punjabi behind. But Hindi is as prominent as the others are, and maybe more at times, especially the consumption of entertainment. So it's largely meant for those markets. And there are common themes within the rural India, or those 5.5 lakhs 5.5 lakhs villages that exist in the HSM markets. And roughly about, I would say about 48% of, or maybe 48 to 52% of the total India population lives in the HSM rural India. And that number is big, but scattered. But within that, there are some themes that emerge every 6-8 months. And we've created a great amount of energy in finding out and funneling out those themes and focus on those common themes. So, just to give an example, for example, you've heard of that farmer agitation and stuff. So actually farming is a theme. Yeah. So the economics related to farming, pains and gains and emotions related to farming, whether it is farmer suicides, whether it is farmer, related stuff and all of that. So farming is one critical component that is common theme. And there are multiple emotions around it. Just to give you an example. And so we tried and pick up these kind of themes. This is just an example. This is not a theme that we picked up, but I'm saying we've tried to pick up these themes and we keep noticing every 6 months what changes are coming in that. So we picked up association with a consumer genius called Santosh Desai, who's the CEO of Future Brands. He's one expert of consumers. In my mind, he's one of the best minds in the country to know consumers very, very well. And his team worked with us very closely, and we've already done 2 strong editions. So one we've done when we initiated the idea about 2 years ago, and one we've done now, recently, about 6 months ago, when we were finally commissioning shows. So, after a regular interval, we try and capture the emotions and themes that are happening there, and what are the thinking about some of the common ideas, commonality of some themes that do exist.
That's right.
Come to think of it, all along, we've created urban channels like Zee TV and TV and all of that. Just think of it, most of the urban channels that exist are for entire urban India, but yet within one building, within one floor, if there are 4 flats, we know that all 4 of them think differently. Their decor is different, their taste of food is different, their likes and dislikes are different. On the common subject, they have a common view, but yet differentiation is there in terms of the interpretation of those views. So, despite that, they found some common themes in urban India and put together a channel. Why not in rural?
I do hear that you have consulted with Santosh Desai. What has been the response of the brand of the FMCGs? For FMCGs, rural India is a huge market, and how have they taken to the concept?
So you see, today, if you look at it from the point of view of rural India, it's not just the FMCG, which of course is the major area where the growth is coming only from rural, but most of the other industries are nearly saturating their business in the urban areas, and no one understands rural very closely. Most often, people have a very distant understanding of rural India, and they want to just serve them from distance and not go forward. And there are interesting food brands, like Colgate and all of that, who have begun paying interest in those markets, and not Colgate. I'm saying brands like Colgate have begun interest in rural India after they have learned that there is a counterfeit market that exists there. There are fake products by their names, and people are already using their brand leverages very efficiently, and there is a proper market. There are factories there. So then they thought, why not we go out and do it? But first time when they went ahead and did it, they didn't pay attention on their individual needs. They thought whatever I'm creating for urban, they'll happily accept it, and they did. But the real business growth came for most of these industries is when they started looking at their needs separately. So, sachets came after that, smaller pouches came after that, differentiation in terms of products, the soaps for them, the food items for them, tastes were different. So they started paying attention. So, initially they looked at it as a market-based market, and then later on they looked at it from a consumer-based market. So I would say we are trying to understand latent demand of entertainment of rural India and serve it. Because existing demand is already saturated from a certain supply. It's a supply-based market right now. They're already consuming content. But we think that, and we believe very strongly that they would resonate with the content which is created for them far more than the ones that are currently offered. the majority of regional markets have developed like this. So, the Sun TV in the South started with the Hindi content dubbed in Tamil. And they were happy with that model. Very cheap, high cost content produced in India, in Bombay, on a syndication basis available to them at a very low cost. Good model. Then they dared to create original content for them at a very, very low cost production wise. But the ratings were skyrocketing. So obviously the people in the regional markets happily consumed when their stories were told in their language than the Hindi products nationally that were there on offer.
So when do we get to see all guns blazing?
Yeah, so the production that got stalled because of this COVID-2 is sort of getting back on track, and I think we are sensibly initiating that process. I can't tell you exact dates, but maybe in a quarter's time, we would be ready to bring it up on air for our viewers. And, that's when we would know as to how our viewers are responding. So right now we started making some relationship with our rural audiences. We're already there on DD Free Dish. We're there on DD Free Dish captures actually a good base of rural audiences today. I wouldn't like to give it a number, but it's a good base. Yeah. And then there are some 40-50 odd cable operators in the heartland that are rural focused. We are also already telecasting our channel on them. So what's happening is we are focusing pretty clear. So when we look at DTH, the other DTH or other cable, we're pretty clear there. What is the skew in the urban? What is the skew in the rural? And trying to focus our prioritization or distribution according to that.
Right. That sounds very interesting, and obviously one looks forward to all of this. Running a GEC requires deep pockets. So how is that going to work out? And also in terms of marketing, because while you're running an entertainment channel, a regular entertainment channel, you can reach out to people through legacy media, through print, television, through outdoor. But to reach out to rural audiences, you will need to look at doing a lot more. So first thing, your marketing, and then the deep pocket.
You're damn right. So you see, marketing is extremely interesting challenge, Pradyuman. However, the rural India works differently to marketing. The urban India is cluttered with tons and tons of information and messages, and we react differently in urban India. If you're honest and simple in rural India, then somehow the viral effect is pretty high there. So something that you're doing less in number in terms of messaging and communication, but if it is honest, if it is clear, if it is effective, it reaches faster, it travels faster in the nearby areas versus in the urban. That's one tendency that I learned during the launch of Zee Anmol. Incidentally, Usha was also there with me at that time, managing the PR of Zee Anmol at that time. So what we are trying to figure out is how do we capture those tentpole activities in the rural markets, which become our, viral amplifiers, and that's the area of marketing that we're trying to do. Of course, the easier options are that some of the popular free-to-air channels that are also having good skew in rural audiences, we could obviously use them by, having cross-network promotions happening on them by paying them the money that they deserve. Even Doordarshan, for that matter, could be a good medium to advertise on. Regarding your other product, which is your other point, that is about deep pocket, I would say GEC either needs deep pockets or need deep understanding. So somebody like, I have the schooling of Zee, where Mr. Chandra fought with Murdochs of the world, not on the basis of deep pockets, but on the basis of deep understanding. Pockets was never a problem, but he didn't want to fight basis that, because there's only so much you can fight with that. Second thing is that there is a serious consideration we've put on this model. So when I say I'm consumer specific and I'm rural India specific, that model is very different than the urban specific. If you get your understanding right, then at the right model, you can engage audiences with the right content, with the right, marketing. But if you're unclear, if you have broad understanding like the urban India, you have to keep attempting high cost content all the time, or high decibel level marketing excitements all the time, because you don't have a deeper understanding. So in my mind, I can't name some of the top networks, but one of the reasons their marketing and content cost is so high is because they don't know what consumers want, and they keep trying all 7, 8, 10, 15 things, which actually take their cost up, and they still remain at the same level.
One last question. Building an entire new channel requires a whole lot of people. And how's the team doing? Have you staffed the entire operation, or are you still on a hiring spree?
No, we've taken care of majority of our staffing requirement. We have reasonable amount of people right now with us on our programming teams, on our marketing teams, on our distribution teams, on our sales teams. PR team was missing so far, but with Usha's entry into our area, that also is taken care of, because we needed PR only now, we didn't need it earlier. So most of our team's already in place, and we are now actually
looking after marketing. That's right, Rachin, who was with you at Zee many years back, and
yeah. So our CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, is a guy called Rachin. So we want to introduce our key management team in some time. That's our second messaging actually. The first messaging is more about Beginnen Media and what we intend to do at a model level. It's a new model, completely new model, Pradyuman, that we are introducing. Because my view is, if you are consumer specific and not content specific, and not in broad entertainment specific, if you're consumer specific, you can actually have a very, very efficient model that's possible for you. But if you're content specific, no model is enough, and there is never any model actually. So this is a good way of explaining my point to you. But rest we will unravel as we move forward, step by step. We don't have any tall claims to make. We don't have any huge ambitions, because when you're creating a new category, a new model, it takes time. And we have reasonable patience and like-minded investors to back us. So it may take a little time, but we're trying to do a meaningful job in building this new category.
Great. This is also, we're going to start the 75th year of India's Azadi. And is that a period where you're going to be looking at the formal launch? Is that?
No, Pradyuman, because our Azad is more about people feeling the sense of liberation and making choices. It's more an internal journey than got to do with any other external independence that you want, because we're already free. It's more like we want people to be free from their old shackles and old ways of living, and think free to progress their own life. So nothing to do with that, I would say.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Bharat Ranga, for this detailed discussion on Azad and what Beginnen Media is going to be doing. I wish you all the very best, and hope to be in touch with you more often.
Thank you so much, Pradyuman. We would soon like to talk about our, super talented team, the new captains of the respective functions. And then in the next stage, we would like to talk about our offerings. So thank you so much for finding time. And this is the first video interview, Usha, we're doing for Beginning. So interesting.
एक तगड़ा कुछ message to your to friends in the industry and what you're going to be all about?
Sorry, say that again. I missed it.
Any tagda message that you want to give people that, hey, bachna, main aa gaya hu. Something like that. Is that something that you would like to give?
No, those who know me well and closely, they know that I always like to do some meaningful work and then move forward in life. What I can tell you is that I remember an interesting time when I was managing international at Zee, and I happened to meet someone close to the Prime Minister then, and I said, if you want to reach out to non-resident Indians across the world, then it's not Doordarshan, but Zee, which is the medium that you can use if you want to say something to them. I hope that we, over a period of time, we're able to build a mechanism where if you want to communicate something to our rural brothers and sisters, we should be the medium. Azad should be the medium. That's the ambition that we have.
I guess that's a very noble and noble ambition to have, and I'm sure it's not going to be easy to reach, but easy to achieve. But it can happen for sure. Thank you very much, and all the very best.
Thank you so much.